The Samil independence movement is called the starting point of Korean independence, and it gets its name Samil because it took place on March 1st of 1919. This was a movement during the Japanese colonization where Koreans went against Japan to gain back their independence. Within the movement, there were a lot of social groups that largely contributed to it. They worked a lot separately, but also worked together to help each other reach higher goals. Some of the prominent groups were the Korean Patriotic Women's Association, the Iwa Hakbang Girls, a group of scholars, and the Korean Youth Independence Corps, and other students. They may have participated in various ways, but in the end, their goal was the same, which is the independence of Korea.
The Korean independence movement started with the Japanese colonization of Korea in 1910. Korea's weak governmental and military power allowed Japan to take over with appointed Korean officials that they could carelessly control. Japan was very harsh on Korea in several ways. The annexation of Korean culture started with the government giving Japanese names to male citizens. Only Japanese and English were allowed in classrooms, and students were punished if they spoke Korean. In addition, Japanese soldiers showed hatred and discrimination towards Koreans. It was common to see a Korean citizen on the ground getting beaten up by soldiers. With all the chaos and unstable government, on January 21, 1919, Gojong, Korea's emperor, passed away. The death of the emperor brought much fear to the citizens. Korean citizens gained hope and determination from American President Woodrow Wilson's 14 points. They were truly inspired by the message of freedom from colonization and self-determination. The Paris Peace Conference was a conference that would decide what the losers and winners of World War I would get. In January 1919, Koreans in Shanghai created the New Korean Youth Association to participate in that conference. The organization sent one representative to attend and gain foreign support. This didn't work though, as most other countries didn't take Korea seriously. An important step towards the movement took place on February 8, 1919. On that day, an event was held in a YMCA auditorium that was filled with around 600 Korean students who were studying in Tokyo. The group of students called themselves the Korean Youth Independence Corps and fought for Korean independence. In the event, a draft of the Korean Declaration of Independence called the February 8th Declarations was posted. A student then read it out loud, which would ignite enthusiasm and lead to a revolt. This marked the moment when Koreans went against Japanese imperialism. With inspiration from the 14 points and February 8th declarations, 33 scholars came together at a restaurant to read their Declaration of Independence and sign it. The scholars were comprised of writers, historians, and also some students. The declaration was drafted by a historian named Choi Nam-son, and they plan to spread it all over the country. We hereby declare that Korea is an independent state and that Korean are a self-governing people. We proclaim it to the nation of the world in affirmation as it would continue. After reading it aloud, signing it, and publishing it, it would quickly cause a series of protests against the Japanese occupation, starting with the one in Pagoda Park. As for the 33 scholars, they then called the Central Police to inform their actions, and they were arrested shortly after. With the publication of the Korean Declaration of Independence by the 33 scholars, many people who were mainly students gathered at a park named Pagoda Park. With all the people gathered, a student by the name of Chon Se-young started to read the declaration out loud. After reading the declaration with optimism, they continued to start a march through the streets while shouting Manse, which meant Long Live Korea. Overall, students played a large role in the movement. They were supposed to get back to school on March 5th, but a majority boycotted it to continue protesting. They did this for 3 months. All over the country, there were many protests which were led by students. What they learned in school, their awareness of the history of the world, and the nationalistic ideas taught changed their thoughts on how Korea should be. This whole movement may have had many different groups, but it was bolstered by students.
Korean women until this point had minimum rights and freedom in the country. A journalist, Frederick Mackenzie, recorded his amazement when he visited Korea in the early 1900s, describing how he saw a very limited amount of women walking around the city. Most of the women were housewives, whose duty were to support the husband and take care of the children and the household. The only women who could freely go out in public were women called giseng. or the entertainers who danced, sang, and poured drinks to their customers. They interacted with the male freedom activists and shared information on their upcoming plans. There were also a big percentage of protesters. Yu Guan-sun, a 16-year-old teenage girl, was inspired by the Korean Declaration of Independence. She gathered her friends from her school, Iwa to protest and distribute homemade taegukgi, the Korean flag, to people who participated. She was a determined freedom fighter who protested in the streets for independence until the day she was arrested by the Japanese military. She was harshly tortured until she died at the age of 17. She is the most well-remembered woman activist who represents thousands of teenage girls and women who participated in the movement. Before she was killed, she wrote in her cell, "Even if my fingernails are torn out, my nose and ears are ripped apart, and my legs and arms are crushed, this physical pain does not compare to the pain of losing my nation. My only remorse is not being able to do more than dedicating my life to my country." Another famous woman activist was Maria Kim. She was an exchange student for Japan Academy, but then returned to Korea for the Tamil movement to be the organizer for female students and teachers. She later founded the Korean Patriotic Women's Association with other female activists and was elected as the president. This organization raised funds for male leaders, organized protests, published booklets and pictures of independence movements, and volunteered as nurses, teachers, and helpers for the citizens. Also, female activists created a newspaper called 신여자, or New Woman, in order to build a political network, common purposes, and to spread their message about their resistance to Japanese activities. This newspaper was a turmoil where Korean women started to stand up for their own rights.
Although the work of various freedom fighters wasn't strongly acknowledged by the government, in the short term they made a big impact and were able to spread and establish the idea of independence among Korean citizens. The movement came face to face with the Japanese military. The Japanese military responded by setting buildings on fire, shooting, and different forms of physical violence. Not only that, they would torture and kill active participants and leaders of the movement. This movement would directly hit the population with a death toll of 7,000 dead, 17,000 wounded, and nearly 50,000 arrested. This movement also changed the setup of the government with the ridding of a government general. The police force also changed to become civilian-based. In the long term, it was movement that boosted the eventual Korean independence. Now, however, the long-term impact of the Korean independence movement is significant to the world even to this day. The movement brought the Korean War after a few years during World War II, which caused the country to be divided. The impact from 70 years ago is still visible today. A once united country was split into two, heading towards completely different goals.
All three groups, the 33 scholars, students, and women activists, were driven to fight for the independence of Korea, and all were able to help each other to go one step closer to their goal of independence. They inspired and supported each other as well as provided for each other's needs. The Tamil, or the Korean independence movement, was a turning point in history because it not only gave independence to Korea, but it represents the blood, sweat, and tears of millions of Korean citizens, and it still holds a very special part in every Korean's heart as the honor for their ancestors and the love towards their country.